Good evening. Welcome to the January 17th, 2018 special meeting of the Murfreesboro Planning Commission. We have a quorum present, so I'll call the meeting to order. We have 3 public hearings scheduled for tonight. They all pertain to basically the same proposal, the first of which is the annexation of the property on Asbury Road. The second will be the zoning application, and then the third one will be the proposed amendments to the zoning ordinance. So going back to the first one, it is the annexation plan of services and the annexation petition for approximately 55 acres located along Asbury Road. Joseph C. Smith and Ricky D. Smith are the applicants. Who would like to start us off?
It is me. Good evening. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Marina Rush. I am fairly new to the planning department, and I am very pleased to be here tonight and very pleased to be here with this department. Thank you, Gary, for hiring me about a year ago.
Thank you for coming to work.
So the first item for this evening is the annexation and plan of services. The property owners, Mr. Joseph Smith and Mr. Ricky Smith, represented by Mr. Matt Taylor of SCC, have requested annexation of their property where they currently reside. The parcel is approximately 55 acres and is located along Asbury Road east of Interstate 24, south of Bingham Street and west of Grassland Drive. The annexation includes this parcel as well as 500 linear feet of Asbury Road. The property is inside the city urban growth boundary and is contiguous to the city limit line to the south. Based on the annexation study, it appears that the city services can be extended to the property upon the effective date of annexation or as development occurs. There is an accompanying zone change requested, as you indicated on the agenda, to the planned unit development zoning district with pattern book accompanying that regarding the development proposal. That is the second item on the agenda. This first item is only regarding the annexation of the property and the plan of services. For this first item, the Planning Commission will need to conduct a public hearing on the annexation petition and plan of services, after which we'll need to discuss this matter, then formulate a recommendation to the City Council.
Okay. Does the applicant have anything they want to present at this time? No? Okay. Before I open the public hearing, I'll briefly go over the rules we conduct our public hearings by. We will open the public hearing. If you would like to speak either for or against the proposal, please come to the microphone. You'll be given an opportunity to come forward once during each public hearing. Come to the microphone, state your name, and give your address if you would. Keep all your comments. It's a cold night outside and a lot of people here, so we've got a lot of people that I'm sure would like to speak. So keep your comments no more than 3 minutes. We will be observing our 3-minute rule tonight. So keep your comments brief and to the point if you would. If you have questions, we'll make note of your questions, or the staff will make note of your questions, and we'll try to get those questions answered at the conclusion of the public hearing. Now, all 3 public hearings we're doing tonight is formulated to make a recommendation to the City Council pertaining to the proposed property. Regardless of what we do, the City Council will probably also have another public hearing at their level to discuss it there. So the city gives an extra opportunity, not just for the council, but for the Planning Commission, for the public to come forward to give your opinion about the proposal. Make all your comments, if you would, to the Planning Commission and not members of the audience. We do not like applause or comments from the audience at all. Please do not speak unless you're up at the microphone and been recognized. All that being said, I'll open the public hearing at this time. This public hearing is for the annexation only. So if you'd like to speak pertaining to the annexation, please come forward to the microphone. Nobody? Okay, last chance. Okay, I'll close the public hearing pertaining to the annexation request. Mr. Taylor, do you have anything you'd like to bring up?
No, sir. We're here for any questions you might have about the annexation, but we will have a presentation for the zoning part of the project.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from members of the Planning Commission? If there are none, we're ready for a motion.
Chairman Lamb, I'll make a motion we approve the annexation, subject to any and all staff comments.
I'll second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. The motion carries. The second public hearing is a zoning application for approximately 55 acres located along Asbury Road to be zoned PUD simultaneous with annexation. Sazerac of Tennessee is the developer. Marina.
Thank you, Chair Lamb. The applicant, Sazerac of Tennessee, is also represented by Mr. Matt Taylor, requests zoning of the 55-acre parcel. The property is presently in the county and is zoned RM. The applicant is requesting a zoning change to planned unit development as prepared a pattern book, which was included in the agenda packet. The adjacent property to the south is Thistledown Subdivision, and it's in the city limits and zone PUD. The adjacent properties to the east and north are in the unincorporated county and part of the Youngstown Residential Subdivision. Interstate 24 is to the west, and a large undeveloped tract is located to the northwest. The purpose of the rezoning is to allow development of a distillery along with ancillary uses. The development proposal includes the distillery building with a visitor center and associated parking area, the bottling and processing building, 4 barrel warehouse buildings, a VIP meeting center building along with associated parking, and other small accessory buildings and silos. The 2035 comprehensive plan recommends that the property develop a suburban residential character. This designation intends residential development with open space and encourages clustering of development to achieve larger open spaces. This proposal concentrates buildings in the interior and generally on the west side of the property and retains large areas of open space on the property on the east and south and a portion of the north. The Planning Commission will need to determine if the proposal would be consistent with this land use designation or if the long-term vision for this area changes due to the nature of the newly adopted 24 major transportation plan, where the transportation plan identifies a 5-lane arterial roadway with an interchange with Interstate 24 of the property. And as I commented, the pattern book was included in the agenda packet. However, please note that the documents in the appendix were excluded in this pattern book, although they were provided to the Commission at December 20th. Copies were prepared and placed on the dais this evening for your consideration. These included technical studies that were completed by professionals in their field, including Ann Pringle, PhD in botany and bacteriology, Joseph Howard, principal at Ramble Environmental, and Kathleen Goodard of Cooley LLP. The applicants are available to make a presentation regarding the zoning and pattern book. The Planning Commission will need to conduct a public hearing, after which we'll need to discuss this matter and formulate a recommendation to the City Council. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Chairman Lamb. Thank you, Ms. Rush. My name is Matt Taylor from SEC here in town, and I'm accompanied tonight by several people. I'd like to introduce each one of those. Ms. Alyssa Henley and Mr. John Lund, both are master distillers with Sazerac. Ms. Mary Beth Hagan of the Hagan Law Group here in Murfreesboro. Mr. Rob Moulton from SEC. Ms. Dr. Ann Pringle, who's a mycologist from the University of Wisconsin, as well as some partners from MTSU's fermentation program. Their interest in the project is obviously the fermentation that would be associated with the distilling process. This would be the last component partner, if you will. They've got a yogurt producer, and they've also got a beer partner coming online. So they are very excited about the potential for our partnership as well. And then Mr. Brian Hercules from the Chamber of Commerce is here as well. We're here tonight to give you a brief presentation on a request to rezone this property to a planned unit development, or a PUD. This request will allow for the construction of a distillery to produce Tennessee whiskey. This whiskey would compete directly with Jack Daniels and George Dickel. This request is made by Sazerac. Sazerac is an American family-owned private distiller. They are the largest private distiller in the USA, and they're the 5th largest in the world. Start by orienting you to the site. As Ms. Rush said, it's about 55 acres located at the end of Asbury Road, which is shown yellow here on the screen, and to the north of I-24, represented by the blue line. Florence Road is to the east of this property, which is just off to the right of this picture here. As you can see from the aerial, the property currently has extensive tree cover and vegetation, which we intend to keep a large portion of, and that is complemented by an approximately 5-acre lake toward the heart of the property. The property also has good access to all the utilities necessary for such development. We have sewer located to the northeast at Junebug Drive. We have water stubs provided by CUD at each of the street stubs into the property. We have electric from Middle Tennessee Electric at those same street stubs, and we have gas from Atmos Energy located at Grassland and Bingham stubs. Topography of the site shows that the property drains in about 3 general directions: to the west, northeast, and southeast. Our development would capture, treat, and meet all the city's stormwater ordinance requirements after our development, just like every other development in the city of Murfreesboro will. Existing zoning for the property, it is still inside of Rutherford County's unincorporated areas as RM, or medium density residential. The properties directly to the west, north, and east are of similar zoning. Property to the south is the Thistle Downs PUD, which consists of smaller lot residential subdivision with a commercial component along Florence Road. The 2035 plan, as Ms. Rush said, called for an interchange directly west of this property, and then for the property itself to develop as a suburban residential, and then the properties to the north and south as auto urban. We feel like with the construction of the interchange, these land use recommendations would change into being more heavily concentrated commercial around the interchange, as we have seen along each of our interchanges in town, and that this use would actually function as a good transition between those commercial uses and back to the residential, with the large expanses of open space and the concentration of development on the west side of the property. Now, just for some pictures of the property itself and the surrounding areas. This picture was taken on the east side of the property along the existing driveway. The fence line that you see in the back is part of the existing fence row and property line. This is an existing pasture or grassed area on the west side of the property. This is where we would propose our barrel warehouses to be constructed in the future. This area is relatively flat right now. It was rough graded and filled by the road contractor for Florence Road whenever that project was going on. That same contractor also stored his heavy construction equipment here at times throughout that project. This is a picture of the lake. This is from the south side of the lake looking north. As you can see, it's quite an impressive feature. Not only did the natural aesthetics of this lake attract my client, the existing springs that flow into this lake are definitely an attractant to my client. They would look to use the water from this lake as throughout their distilling process. While this is an asset for our use, it would be a detriment for and a liability for other potential users such as residential neighborhoods on how to secure small children or other users from possibly falling in. This is a picture of the existing Asbury Road. Our property would be to the left here and I-24 to the right. Here's some of the surrounding homes of the property. This is in Thistle Downs, located to our south. And this is Youngstown subdivision to the east of the property. This is looking south from Bingham Street, which is located to the north. This is looking directly into the property. This is Junebug, which is located in Thistle Downs. This would be looking north toward the property. And this is Grassland within the Youngstown development to the east of the property, so this would be looking west into our property. I will note that none of these stub streets are proposed to be connected onto with driveways for our development. They'll remain stubs for the future. The plan itself, shown here, we have proposed a PUD zoning, which essentially means we can do what we show on this plan and what we put in the pattern book and nothing more. If we were to request more, we would have to come back before this body in this same process. Some quick notes about the plan itself. It consists of 8 main buildings and then accompanied that by some accessory structures such as silos and guard shacks that are necessary for the function of the project and the process of the distillery. We currently have 2 entrances shown off Asbury as well as a stub at the northwest corner of the property. We would view the connections to Asbury as temporary until the future 5-lane connection to the northwest was constructed, and at that time these would become gated secondary emergency type access points for the development. I will say we have concentrated all of our major activities and buildings on the west side of the site, as you can see here, and plan to retain extensive green space represented by all the green shading, leafy texture there that you see around the property. The buildings themselves, this is the visitor center. This is where any guests, possibly daily workers or tourists would enter the site and begin their tours of the property. The distillery itself, this is where the processing and actual still would be located. The bottling building, this is where it would come after the warehouses before it's shipped out to future customers. The barrel warehouses themselves, we show 4 of those. They would house about 20,000 barrels apiece for about a total of 80,000 barrels. As some comparison, George Dickel houses between 250,000 and 300,000 barrels on their site, whereas Jack Daniel's probably has millions of barrels. So while we're not a craft distiller, we are considerably smaller than those operations barrel-wise. This would also be a location for possible expansion, the barrel warehouses. While we can't expand on this property because what we show is what we can do, we would build barrel warehouses elsewhere and just simply have to truck the barrels to those warehouses. The VIP meeting center is located on the eastern side. This is basically in the identical spot that the existing house is constructed on site. This VIP meeting center will be host to occasional events, mainly for bartenders, distributors, potential buyers from Sazerac, so that they can get educated on the product, how it pairs well, and how to describe it and talk about it in public. But, however, no means are these large events. We're not trying to recreate an Arrington Vineyards. Arrington Vineyards is great, but that's not what we want to do. Our main function here is the production of whiskey and not event space. On the western portion of the property is the charcoal pavilion. A primary component of Tennessee whiskey is that it is filtered through a charcoal filter. That charcoal is created by stacking wood in a honeycomb crisscross fashion and then burning it. That's something that would take place approximately half a dozen times a year and will last for 4 to 6 hours. Once that burn is complete, it's placed under the pavilion to dry before it's placed in the grain silo to be stored until needed. Operating hours, when we first open, we anticipate 1 shift that would run from about 8 to 5, and that would employ about 20 to 25 people, with a heavy concentration of them being located in the visitor center for the touring facilities themselves. In the future, we could possibly go to 2 shifts, at which time it would range in time from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. Any of our activities that are associated outside of normal work hours or work functions, such as the visitor center or the VIP meeting area, would be completed by 11 o'clock at night. And then all of our setbacks that we've proposed here either are greater than or equal to any of the required setbacks for an industrial or a commercial property in Murfreesboro's zoning ordinance. Our pattern book does lay out several proposed allowed uses. By and large, the main function there is distillery. The rest of these are ancillary or accessory type uses, but we did want to spell those out as allowed uses. The restaurant, both the visitor center and the VIP area could have functions there that would be considered a restaurant. It is not a everyday public can walk in restaurant, but they do have functions there where they serve food. Same thing with the event space use we've classified in those same areas. Museum, we could possibly have some history in there, some pictures that would fall underneath that regime. And tourism, and obviously the warehouse storage would be where the barrel warehouses are. Again, all these uses are quiet in nature. The bulk of the activities are taking place inside the buildings themselves with very limited activities outside. Architecture across the buildings will be consistent in nature, both in style and materials. We want to create a campus atmosphere and campus theme here as people enter the property so they walk away remembering what it looks like and wanting to come back. Our buildings will be designed with varying roof lines, multiple building planes, high-quality materials, and will concentrate on elaborate entrances so as people know where to go when they're looking their way around the campus. We'll also be looking to position these buildings to highlight the lake feature. From that picture, you can see why we would want to do this. The visitor center and distillery building will be a main focal feature of activity. This building is projected to be no more than 50 feet tall. It will house a tasting room, and the distillery portion will have a hammer mill inside. The hammer mill is what we basically grind up our grain with that's necessary for the process. That will be inside and contain that noise. Some of the materials the architect has chosen, I think, are unique. We don't get to see these every day in our normal commercial environments. Curved roofs, wood with architectural metals, stone and cedar planks. And he spread this theme across the campus. And you can see he's going to use a heavy concentration of windows or glazing, if you will, on those sides that face the lake to really allow our visitors and employees to enjoy that view. Bottling and processing building, here again, this is more of a warehousing type function, but the architect has done a very good job of creating multiple building lines and roof lines, and again, introducing those nice quality materials to create a lot of interest. The barrel warehouses themselves be a maximum of 66 feet tall and bring that same architectural style from the other buildings to these. Charcoal pavilion, it's a very simple structure, but it will be themed and cohesive with the rest of the project. The VIP meeting center, you can tell from these pictures, we want everything to be very airy and light. This is supposed to be kind of a wow room, if you will. And so we want to fully engage that lake with this architecture. He's done a very nice job of that. One of the crucial things in our design were the buffer standards. The property has extensive vegetation that we want to retain, but we've also planned to plant some new material in places. And so we went through and did several sightline studies around the property to try to show you what these will look like and how it will screen and prevent the view of the buildings. And so this one right here represents the pink line. It's on the northern portion of this map. The warehouses would be on the left and the existing residences on the right. This will be the green and the same orientation there. And then the yellow line, you can see the warehouses, the lake, and then the homes on the right. And then the same thing for the blue line, except for here it's the visitor center instead of the warehouses. You'll notice on the map the more green textured, leafy textured look. Those are existing buffers and tree lines that will remain in place. There's a more solid pale green that's around the perimeter, clouded look. Those are places that we have self-identified that the existing vegetation is probably a little thin. So we have committed to come in those areas and plant a city standard type D landscape buffer, since those are thin at this time. Here's a picture looking about where the distillery building, looking back south. You see extensive trees. You don't see any structures that direction. This is this is picture 2 on the map. This is looking to the right where there's an existing driveway and approximately where our future road would go as well. This third picture is closer to the property line. This is one of the areas that we self-identified, felt like was a little thin, as you can tell. These pictures were taken in early December, so it's a winter condition. We will be planting extra material here to bring this up to a type D buffer criteria. I will say that whenever we held our neighborhood meeting along Bank Street, which is the street just to the east of this map, a lady called me and was inquiring about the project, wanted to know where the nearest building was going to be, which was going to be the VIP meeting center. And she lived about 4 rows up from the bottom of this cul-de-sac. And so I referenced the existing house. That's basically exactly where our VIP meeting area is. And she said, well, I don't know where that is because I can't see the existing house from my backyard. So what she could see was an existing light on a pole. And so that was able to get her close to that. But I think that speaks well to how dense this vegetative buffer is, and we're even going to add to that in certain locations. And then this is looking back toward the south. There's an existing driveway that the neighbors to the east of us have rights to come across our property and access their land. That driveway will remain, and all this vegetation to the south will remain as well. You can see how dense that is looking back toward the south. Most of those were to the south and east. This is to the west, looking toward the Desmukes. You can see it's a decent tree cover, but it leaves something to be desired low. And so almost this entire run of property that we share with the Desmukes will be getting a new type D buffer. This is located at the existing house, looking toward the northeast. This is actually directly on the other side of the tree line that you see in the upper picture. And you can see how effective that tree row is from buffering what's on the other side. If you're standing at the existing house, you wouldn't know that those homes were there. And then this is located a little bit further north of the existing home, looking toward Bingham. And you can start to make out some structures through there, and that's one of the locations we've identified we will be supplementing the buffer at. Not only with landscape buffer, we feel like with distance, we provided good buffers. These 3 rings here represent 300-foot increments from the center of the distillery. So you can see from the center of the distillery building, it's a little bit over 600 feet before we get close to a home to the east of us. And then at 900 feet, we're getting close to the existing homes to the south in Thistle Downs and to the north along Bingham. So that's about 3 football fields. Access, as I mentioned earlier, we've got 2 access points planned on Asbury that we would consider temporary. What we consider our permanent access would be at the northeast or northwest corner that would connect into the future Cherry Lane extension at that location once that is constructed. And we do plan guard shacks at each of these entrances. The yellow line here represents Asbury and how that would get access back to Florence Road. It is basically an interstate frontage road which turns up and crosses and bypasses about 9 residential lots before it passes back through the commercial part of Thistledowns and then directly onto Florence Road. We did host a neighborhood meeting back on September 19th. We sent out about 260 invite letters for that meeting. We estimated about 50 or 60 attendees came there. We heard several concerns at that meeting. We spent the next several months trying to address those the best that we could. One of those was access. We feel like we've addressed that by committing to enter into a public-private partnership with the city to accelerate the construction of the 5-lane roadway connection that was to the northwest, the Cherry Lane connection. We've also, from the get-go, made commitments that we'd not be connecting into the stub streets from the existing residential neighborhoods. At that meeting, there was also some concerns of what's commonly termed whiskey mold. Since that time, we have hired Dr. Pringle, who's an expert in that field, and she had previously come down, completed site visits, made observations of the areas, and was able to provide you with a letter that essentially stated the area would have no more mold after this development than what naturally occurs there today. There was also concerns of ethanol. We hired an expert, Mr. Hauer, on that. He was able to provide a letter stating that the operations at this facility will produce less than 5 parts per million of ethanol. The EPA does not consider ethanol an odor issue until 80 parts per million and does not consider it a flammable condition until 33,000 parts per million. And we're going to be operating under 5 parts per million. And then there were some concerns about smell and noise. The smells are contained internally to the buildings, and the noise by and large is internal. We will have trucks that come and go each day. That will create some noise. We understand that, but would not be more than the interstate traffic. And then we'll also have a grain elevator near the silos, which will create intermittent noise. However, that's the reason we have located those features on the west side of that building and on the western side of our property. I will say that I have visited several distilleries, both around this location and to the north in Kentucky, and the smells that I smell are inside the building. When you open the door, that's when you hear the noises, and it's not an offensive smell. It's more of a sweet cornbread type smell that I have personally seen come from those facilities. So I'll be happy to answer any questions now or after the public hearing.
Okay, any questions from members of the Planning Commission? Okay, thank you, Mr. Taylor. Is there anything else, Mr. Taylor?
No, I was trying to get the PowerPoint back down.
Okay.
There we go. Thank you.
Okay. If there's no questions by the Planning Commission, I'll open the public hearing at this time. Ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak.
Yeah.
There's this one for executive, and then this one just
Okay, thank you.
Members of the Planning Commission.
Please start with your name and address, okay? Thank you.
I'm Heather Cadenhead. I'm a resident of Thistledowns, the neighborhood that will be directly impacted the most by the Sazerac proposal. Members of the Planning Commission. In 2012, while campaigning for City Council, then candidate Eddie Smotherman expressed his desire to, quote, be a councilman that has ears that will listen and a voice that will truly speak up for the voters once they get elected. Will this Planning Commission tonight have a voice that will speak up for the people? Tonight, I respectfully request that the Planning Commission vote no on this rezoning request. As the mother of 2 young children, health and safety are extremely important to me. I never would have purchased a home in Thistle Downs had I known that residential zoning ordinances I thought would protect my family could in fact be sold to the highest corporate bidder. At the December meeting, Matt Taylor made note of the fact that Sazerac will make a significant contribution to pay for a portion of a city-proposed 5-lane extension near the distillery, as well as a proposed interchange at I-24. If the Planning Commission votes in favor of rezoning in any way, shape, or form because of the carrot that Sazerac has dangled in front of the city, then this Planning Commission will be complicit in not only crony capitalist dealings, but crony capitalist dealings that will devastate a residential community. A community full of families, hardworking men and women who simply want to continue breathing clean air. Young children who simply want to play basketball or ride their bikes without fear of semi-trailer trucks disrupting their play. Good people who worked hard to put down payments on homes they felt confident buying because of things like zoning ordinances. In fact, Bob Lamb, who serves as chairman of this commission, is selling a home in Thistle Downs right now. Exit Realty Bob Lamb and Associates is currently under contract to sell 5140 Cicada Circle. On his website, Chairman Lamb raves, great location. My question for Chairman Lamb is, did Exit Realty disclose to its contracted buyer that this great location may soon lose its residential zoning? Is the future homeowner aware that this great location may soon be adjacent to a commercial distillery? I also want to make a quick note of the fact that it was discussed by Mr. Taylor tonight that events would end around 11 o'clock. At the September meeting, they assured us that they would end no later than 7. So we've already seen a change in some of the things that they initially told us about. And we've seen that, they've kind of stretched on that as we've gone farther in this process. On a personal note, as some of you know, I'm the mother of a child with autism. We moved from a prior home to this neighborhood because of mold concerns in our prior home. We specifically selected a new construction neighborhood believing that mold would be less of an issue. At the September meeting at the Grove, Sazerac representatives admitted that a tree on their property had turned black from mold. If you were there, then you heard them admit that. They've hired experts to tell you that this won't happen here. But if there had been a tape recorder at that meeting, they would have told you themselves that it has happened on their property. An article in the New York Times addressed the, quote, sooty-looking black gunk creeping on the outside of homes near the Buffalo Trace Distillery in Frankfort, Kentucky, a distillery owned by the Sazerac Company.
Heather, you need to wrap it up, please.
Yes, sir. Symptoms of mold exposure can range anywhere from mild to severe. Those symptoms are caused by something called mycotoxins, which can have a harmful effect on both humans and animals. They've been shown to suppress immune function. Your handouts talk about mycotoxins if you could take a glance at those. They've been shown to suppress immune function by affecting mitochondrial function. Now, my son has a mitochondrial disorder, but this can negatively impact anyone. Mycotoxins over time can decrease resistance to infectious diseases and reactivate chronic infections. If this distillery is built, the question isn't if we'll experience negative health impacts, but who will experience negative health impacts. Please vote no on this rezoning request. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am.
And Heather, I was going to ask, we only got Heather. Can you give us your last name?
Yes. It's Cadenhead, Cadenhead.
And your address, you said you were in Thistle Downs, but what?
Yes, I'm on Honeybee Drive. I'm one of the, you can see my house if you pull up Mr. Taylor's slide with the Junebug extension. My house with the swing set is the one to the left.
Honeybee Drive. You're, okay.
Thank you, Ms.
Just
Cadenhead.
in general, everybody needs to give their address
Okay.
and their full name.
Let me remind you, no comments or applause from the audience, please.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Bo Dismukes, and I'm here representing the Dismukes family farm. I live at 6931 Sparta Pike, Watertown, 37184. Contrary to what you may have heard here earlier, We have the largest single contact point with this development of anybody in this room. We run the entire western line of this property, some 1,500 feet, join our farm. So we would be very concerned and we would be highly impacted by what happens with this property. We're going to be hard pressed to find new landowners that will be as good a neighbors as the Smiths were, as they've been over the past several years. We're hoping that the company that we put in there, you put in there, we will fit the bill. From our standpoint, the worst thing that could impact our farm would be that this property remains zoned residential with development proceeding as currently zoned. Subdivisions do not make good neighbors for farms nor any open landowners for that matter. They bring a plethora of problems to us almost on a daily basis. And the closer houses get, the more dense they get, the more problems we have. Taking this opportunity to rezone this property would provide a much-needed buffer. From what we've heard and read about the Sazerac company plans for this property, we support the rezoning and we support Sazerac. I hope this commission moves forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Got any
Dismukes.
questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Christy Andrews. I lived at 5212 Honeybee Drive in Thistledowns here in Murfreesboro. I'm very much opposed to the annexation, the rezoning, and overall plan for a distillery in a neighborhood at the proposed property of Asbury Road. The primary purpose of zoning is to segregate uses to prevent new development from interfering with existing uses and or to preserve the character of a community, to divide a municipality into residential, commercial, and industrial or district zones that are for the most part separate from one another, with the use of property within each district being reasonably uniform. I don't see how in any way a zoned residential neighborhood would be considered compatible with an industrial or manufacturing business such as a distillery. There's an abundance of available land in Murfreesboro already zoned and suitable for this type of plan. I believe it's impractical and foolish to change the zoning for this proposal. As a homeowner and resident of Murfreesboro and Thistledowns, I believe that the rezoning would have a significant impact on the character and quality of our neighborhood. It seems like this whole plan is going towards this future plan, but we all know plans can change. That's why we're here today. So we can't base all of their plans on this future plan of the city because it's in the future. We don't know that's going to happen. That road may never be built. But I do ask that you welcome Sazerac to the borough just in an area appropriate for this type of business. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Andrews.
Hello. I'm Clyde Willis. I live at 2908 Junebug Drive in Thistledowns with my wife, our 2 cats, and our basset hound. Put that in the record. So first of all, thank you very much for letting us talk. It means a lot to us that you take the time to allow us to voice our opinions and our concerns about certain projects. The Sazerac company is a well-respected company. They're a well-established company. They're not going to build a shack. We know they're going to build a beautiful facility, one that everybody in Murfreesboro is going to be proud to call home, right? Our concern, or my concern, is the location. There's a couple of pieces of that concern. One is it looks like we're going through so many steps to allow this project to actually happen. And it also uses our neighborhood as part of the access to this property, which could possibly present a danger to the people that live in the neighborhood. So I would respectfully ask that this panel pause and ask, why are we willing to change so many aspects of what already exists to allow this company to be located here? I would also I would like to implore you to take a minute and imagine, are there other facility or other locations within Murfreesboro that we don't have to change so many aspects of that land or the use of that land for this project to actually be approved. So again, I think Sazerac is a wonderful company. They're well respected in the spirits world. I just don't think that facility using our neighborhood as access for a limited time or not makes any sense for our citizens.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Willis. Anybody else?
Do you want me to do that?
Should I start?
Go ahead. Yes, sir.
My name is Patrick Banker, B-A-N-K-E-R.
Spell it again, please.
B-A-N-K-E-R. And I'm at 2926 Lightning Bug Drive, also in Thistle Downs.
Thanks, sir.
Thanks for letting me speak here today. I'll be speaking today specifically about Bedonia, or the whiskey fungus. During the last meeting, this was treated as some irrational fear, and you guys were even given a letter by Miss Ann Pringle giving her opinion that this is not a threat. However, I've printed off more than a dozen articles and studies from a broad range of other independent sources and experts saying that Bedonia is a problem around distilleries. The facts are that Bedonia is such a concern around distilleries that it has been recognized by several government agencies, multiple other experts, at least 6 countries, and several universities. All of these sources I have provided have the same overwhelming consensus that Bedonia thrives specifically around distilleries and will affect our neighborhood. Several government sources and the British Mycological Society said the fungus is responsible for, quote, black growth on walls and other surfaces in the vicinity of distilleries, unquote. The National Institutes of Health said it, quote, colonizes surfaces such as buildings, fences, signs, and vegetation, unquote. The University of British Columbia said, quote, a pronounced blackening often extends considerable distances from distilleries, unquote. Another source stated that Bedonia can spread, quote, up to a mile away from distilleries, unquote, while another said Bedonia causes, quote, extensive aesthetic damage, unquote. Lastly, Dr. Scott, the man who actually claimed what whiskey fungus was, said every distillery we have ever tested has had it. And these are just a few. So these facts, along with the added knowledge that Jack Daniels even has a sign next to a completely blackened tree at their own distillery admitting that, quote, that the black coating on this tree is characteristic of distillery warehouse areas, unquote, shows that Bedonia is a serious threat. In fact, Mrs. Pringle's own letter states in paragraph 4, samples found in distilleries house substantial amounts of Bedonia, and added in the next sentence, quote, several hundred feet off distillery property, trace amounts can be found, unquote. So even their own paid expert admits that this is a threat. Along this point, look at the pictures in the articles I provided. These pictures speak for themselves, and you can see that this absolutely is not trace amounts. On a side note, I would also like to address the comments that this fungus is somehow acceptable because it is naturally occurring. That is not a justification. No one disagrees that it's natural, but it is only natural around distilleries. The University of British Columbia even says that it has never been found in nature away from a distillery. Let me state this another way. This fungus is not going to grow on your property unless you live around a distillery, period. Hence the name whiskey fungus. Along that point, cancer is also naturally occurring, yet they ban smoking and asbestos in every building to help prevent it. Naturally occurring does not make it okay. In closing, the bottom line in regards to Bedonia is that every one of these experts, even their own, admit that the same thing, that this fungus does exist around distilleries, even if they disagree on the schematics of it. So if there is even a minuscule chance that this fungus could be any kind of an issue at all with this facility, which all of these experts, including their own, admit that it is a chance, then the city should not be willing to put their residents and their properties at risk. Please do the right thing and move this facility somewhere else other than where we live. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening. My name is Rick Matties. I live at 5225 Honeybee Drive in Thistle Downs. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on the Sazerac Distillery proposal. There are many reasons why this should not be approved, and I'd like to address the issue of the traffic. Directing commercial traffic through a residential neighborhood consisting of semi-trucks, employees, visitors, some whom will be sampling whiskey, through a residential neighborhood for an unspecified period of time is unacceptable. This is where we play with our children, get kids on and off the bus, as well as just taking simple walks through the neighborhood. On page 9 of the Planning Commission annexation report, it states that Asbury Road would need to be reconstructed for commercial access and proper turnaround. This requirement confirms that this is not a suitable access point. As busy as Florence Road gets at certain times of the day, I can envision accidents happening as semi-trucks attempt to make left-hand turns from Asbury Road to Florence Road. This will create the same dangerous condition that existed before the now closed portion of Asbury was opened. I have a couple questions on the Asbury upgrade. I mean, who will pay for that? And the upgrade, does that include the portion of Asbury that extends through Thistledowns neighborhood? Section 4 of Asbury Road that goes through Thistledowns does not even have a final coat of asphalt paving on it. So I don't know how that will impact the constant semi-traffic. And why spend the money to upgrade Asbury Road if it would not be used once the 5-lane road is constructed, which SASRAC has already committed to a significant contribution to? And I'm assuming when they say contribution, they mean they're going to pay for it. We cannot wait till 2040 for a new 5-lane road. As for the hours of operation, which Mr. Taylor alluded to, they have a lot of different uses that they have included that were not part of the original proposal that they brought up to us at the neighborhood meeting in September. If they're having all these different events and tours and whatnot, I think there should be specific hours of operations for each one of those different uses. Some would say that it's not a big deal. That's where we live, running along I-24. Semis are running along I-24 day and night. Those of us in Thistledowns knew the freeway was there when we purchased our homes. It's quite a bit different hearing semi-trucks on the freeway and hearing them 10 to 15 feet from your home. I never envisioned having to live next door to an industrial manufacturing facility in an area zoned residential. If SASRAC wishes to bring the distillery to Murfreesboro or Worthburg County, then it should be in an area already zoned for industrial use. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hi. Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Sean Erdman, E-R-D-M-A-N. I live at 2919 Junebug Drive. Got a wife, 2 children, and I have 2 dogs. One of them's great, the other one not so much. I'm actually going to bring a historical aspect to this meeting, and I appreciate y'all being here. I know it's cold and late. I don't know if y'all remember, there was supposed to be a Bible park built back in 2007, 2008, back in the Blackman area. The Bible park wasn't actually supposed to be too far away from where we're talking about right now. Today, they're building a residential neighborhood there called Shelton Acres. I believe Mr. Taylor's over that too. That was being brought by Safe Harbor out of New York by a man named Arbor Bartour. 280-acre facility for $200 million. The neighbors, of course, came out against it in force, and I watched all the meetings and everything. I lived out there at that time too. Rutherford County Commission actually voted against it 12-9 because of the response, because it's a residential area. This is where people raise their kids. They go to church there. You know, there's schools, there's families. And I believe Mr. Taylor mentioned that there is commercial on Florence Road, but it's a gas station. It services our neighborhoods. It's not for tourists. You know, you might drive through there and get some chicken or something, but it's for us. The distillery is going to be for anybody, and that means we're going to have anybody coming to our street, anybody wandering through our neighborhood because they're lost. You know, people that have been at events that may be inebriated, may not. I don't know. But it's not necessarily something that we all thought, hey, you know what? I know there's an interstate there and there's a farm there. There's probably going to be a distillery there. Let's move there and raise our families. That's not what had happened. That's the same thing that happened with the Bible park. People said the same thing, same arguments: traffic, pollution, light pollution, noise pollution, trash, smell. water and sewer runoff. The Bible Park was actually supposed to use Florence Road, the main road to get to all our subdivisions on the Thistle Downs, Youngstown, all of them. They were supposed to use that as their service entrance. So their trash trucks, their delivery trucks, all their employees, they were going to run up and down Florence Road. That's our neighborhood road. Our school buses go down that road. You know, we go to work down that road. Asbury Road was actually altered a few years ago because it was so dangerous to pull out of, because there's a bridge over the interstate right next to it. So they altered it to go through where our neighborhood is. It does actually touch houses. One thing that wasn't mentioned or shown in the pictures is along Asbury Road, there's houses built right up against Asbury Road. And I'm talking like 10 feet from Asbury Road. And if you go down Asbury Road, it is pavement that is basically rough and breaking apart. It was an extension from the Asbury Road that goes through the battlefield that 840 cut off. It's not made for semi-traffic. So they're going to have to totally redo that road. It's already narrow because you got the interstate on one side, the neighborhood on the other. People walk down that road. Kids ride their bikes down that road. It's not a road for semis. But I appreciate your time. I just wanted to bring that historical aspect. This isn't the first time we've tried to get commercial out there. It's not the only time it's ever been defeated. And I please ask that you vote no. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Erdman. Anybody else?
Hi, my name is Carrie Berry. I live at 2829 Lightning Bug Road, and I am actually one of those houses that is right on Asbury Road. My house is about 10 feet off that road. We see and hear everything that goes up and down it. I have lived in Murfreesboro for 10 months. We moved here from Nashville. We could have chosen to buy our first home in Nashville. We did not. My husband and I looked at a lot of houses, and then we saw this one, and it was it. I am very much against this proposal. As others have said, environmental impacts. I have severe asthma. I could have chosen to live in Nashville and deal with the smog. We chose to come here because we think it's beautiful. We love it. We love our community, and we want that to be maintained. When we purchased this home, we looked at it as an investment, and now we're wondering, did we make the wrong one? Did we make the wrong choice by choosing Murfreesboro? So as I said before, I am very against the proposal. I hope that you all will do the right thing and vote against it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Berry.
Hello, my name is Farron Hardy, Hardy. I live at 5028 Asbury Road. I am actually the third house on the right when you actually see the pictures from the presentation. I personally just moved into that home back in October. If I had known that we were going to have this type of impact to our community, we would have never purchased in that community. I love it. It's family oriented. We don't need that type of traffic. I personally do not want to see semi-trucks in and out of my home. I work from home every day, and this type of impact to our community can definitely impact the value of our homes. It can impact the amount of activity for the kids in the neighborhood. We personally don't have any children, but I love seeing the kids up and down the roads on their bikes, walking, running, playing. Today I saw children in the road and on the in their area sledding. It was amazing. That type of impact is definitely going to hurt our community to have this type of distillery near us. I personally believe you should say no to this distillery. It's going to impact not only the values to our homes, it's going to impact our neighborhood. I don't want to hear semi-trucks back and forth. I'm right on the road. We are the ones that are going to be directly impacted, along with Lightning Bug, along with other streets as well. You all have to understand that this is a community of families. This is a community of people that are wanting to come to Murfreesboro. Murfreesboro is a family-oriented place. There are several different locations in Murfreesboro that this distillery could easily access and have the expansion that they may need in the future. They only have 4 buildings for storage, as his presentation showed. If they need to expand, I don't want the extra traffic of semi-trucks transporting that whiskey back and forth. What if there is some type of leak? What if there is any type of damage that's done to our roads? Are they going to pay for it? Are they going to pay for the damages of people being drunk and running into our mailboxes, running into our homes? I will not be okay with that, and I will go directly to them. Not only the person that maybe made that mistake, but also to the distillery. This is our family. This is our neighborhood. This is not acceptable. There's plenty of locations within Murfreesboro that this can be located. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hardy. Anybody else?
Ann Strode. I live at 5307 Honeybee Drive, Strode. I just want to make it clear that we have no problem with the distillery in Murfreesboro. We have a problem with it being in our neighborhood within Murfreesboro. You can put this anywhere else and no one would bat an eye at it. But there is absolutely no reason for it in the back of any neighborhood. Even if you took all of these concerns away, this facility still does not belong around a residential neighborhood. If this was in your backyard, you and I both know you wouldn't want it there either, so please do not put it in ours. This facility will do nothing but frustrate and anger residents, as you can see by the petition in your packet, while at the same time causing dangerous conditions and driving down home values in the surrounding area. Feel free to put this anywhere else in Murfreesboro, just not in our neighborhood. Please do the right thing and deny this request.
Thank you, Ms. Strode.
Hi, I'm Taylor Berry, 2829 Lightning Bug Drive, and I would just like to echo the concerns of all of my neighbors and my wife. We do not want this distillery here. We have no problem with the distillery in Murfreesboro. I'm sure it'll be great for the economy, but please put it somewhere else. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Berry.
Good evening. My name is Christy Dennis. I live at 5233 Honeybee Drive in Thistle Downs. I've been a military wife for many years. My husband's retired military. Over the last 30 years, we've made, I think this was our 15th move. So I'm used to moving to different places most of the time because we have to. We have finally found the place where I wanted to stay and retire. I don't know if I'm going to be able to or not. I'm highly opposed to this being in our residential area. Along with everybody else, I have no problem with the distillery in Murfreesboro. I think it would be a wonderful idea to bring tourism and, be another focal point besides people just going to Nashville. I do not think it needs to be near our neighborhood. One thing Patrick did not mention when he was talking about the whiskey mold is every story that we've read, every study that we've looked at, you cannot get rid of it. It causes damage to houses. It causes damage to the paint on your cars. And within a mile's distance, you have all those brand new car dealerships right there at the intersection of Medical Center Parkway and Manson, where it comes across there. Just across the interstate from there, you've got the avenues and all your beautiful stores and all that development going in there. You have a brand new Christian Children's Academy that just went in on Manson Pike that's well within distance. All these places are going to be affected, not just people's homes, which is really a big thing, but they're going to be affected also. I don't see why there's any reason to put it here, and I did not get to attend the September meeting, when this was first presented to us by Sazerac, but I was told by people that attended that it was admitted by Sazerac that they did not have to use this property, that they had looked at other ones that were suitable also. I'm asking you to say no to this. They've also admitted that talking about expansion, that they would build barrel houses elsewhere and truck it to the barrel houses to be aged there. If that's a possibility when they expand, can they not do the barrel houses somewhere else to keep the whiskey mold problem out of the way if this should be approved? There's too many arguments, and I really, really implore you all to think very long and hard about whether you would want this in your community if you were the one that was living there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dennis. Anybody else?
My name is Alex Courtner. I live at 5214 Ladybug Lane. Before I make the echoes of everybody else that is in here, my devotion today just kind of hit upon what we heard. Today's verse was Proverbs 20:17. It says, "A just man walketh in integrity, and he is blessed by his children." I ask you, the panel, Planning Commission, to use integrity to vote no on this zoning and this development. A whiskey distillery on top of a residential neighborhood with excellent people that have moved here because of your growth, because of what Murfreesboro has to offer, is the wrong thing. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Colin Abel. I live at 5122 Lunamoth Lane, and that's Abel, A-B-E-L. I'm not going to sit here and echo what we've heard. Unfortunately, there is no reason for a distillery to be on top of a residential property, and we know that. The reason I think is going to be an economic issue due to the fact Sazerac has a very, very invested interest in this interchange that's going in correctly, running right to 24. We all know Middle Tennessee it has access to 6540, and we're running it, and obviously this is going to be a distribution company. That is why they want this access to 24. It is very, very concerning to the fact that they would invest this type of money, and the money that's going to X number of chairmen. Mr. Lamb, I'm a little concerned. This isn't a question, but you recently sold a property in our subdivision?
Me personally?
Yes, sir. Was that brought to the attention of an individual on this council that has sold a property located in here? No? His company. His company. And was it disclosed that there possibly would be this whiskey facility? It was not?
The answer to that, I don't know.
You do not know? Okay. Like I said, I would hope that this council, that you guys would propose no to this plan, just on a moral and an integrity basis. So, thank you, gentlemen and ladies.
Mr. Abel.
Hi, my name is Josh Hendricks. I live at 2937 Butterfly Bend. I share the same concerns as the other residents in the Thistle Downs neighborhoods and the other surrounding neighborhoods. The whiskey mold is kind of frightening. You know, there's research that says it's not a problem. There's research that says it is a problem. You know, that's a frightening conundrum for people who don't know anything about this stuff and are subject to decisions made by others. We do thank you for hearing us all today. My main concern is the traffic flow through the neighborhood, shared by others as well. Specifically coming into the portion of Asbury that zigzags through past the houses before it cuts on to the frontage road. That seems a little nonsensical to do that. Risky in a lot of ways. What I would like to know, or what my concern is if I heard correctly, 2035 is when we're anticipating that the interchange is going to be open to the north and the 5-lane road there, and that's when they'll move their traffic to that end of it. I kind of find that hard to believe. That's their rear end. that's, I find it hard to believe they're going to want to bring all their visitors and all their traffic to the back door behind all the barrel houses when all of their visitor centers and everything faces the other way where it's going to be built initially. So I wonder and worry about that. But my more immediate question and concern is about the closed portion of Asbury Road where it meets up to Florence. I understand why that was closed. It's close to that bridge. There's a slope there coming to that bridge. It's dangerous. It's going to create a dangerous situation for all these tractor trailers coming in and out, sitting in that turn lane. It's already a lot of traffic there during the peak times. It's going to be, who knows how bad it's going to be. It's going to be bad. What I would like to know is, has it been considered to open up that closed section of Asbury Road with a traffic light to make it safe? If that might not be safe enough, do a double traffic light. The traffic light there at the road, another traffic light back at the bridge to correspond with it, to flash, say, hey, there's a traffic light up here, to make it safe. And I also would like to know, is this panel willing to defer voting on this in order for a more thorough study into that option?
Thank you, Mr. Hendricks.
Okay. And I would also please implore you, vote no. We don't want it.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Cheryl Maddies. I live at 5225 Honeybee. I would like to point out that in addition to Thistle Downs and Youngstown neighborhood, which directly border the proposed site, there are also 9 additional neighborhoods that are within a 1-mile radius of this project. Seward Crossing, Florence Green, Florence Point, Florence Village, Adam Run, Adams Point, Cherrywood Estates, Spring Lake, and Heatherwood. Also, the construction has begun in the Cedar Retreat neighborhood as well as another one that wasn't even listed yet on the city website. I believe that you guys have a responsibility to the citizens of Murfreesboro to vote no on this project. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hi, my name is David Colin, C-O-L-I-N. I live at 3341 Flat Circle, Spring Lake subdivision. This is definitely about more than just Thistledown. I'm going to apologize up front because I'm late to the party. I didn't even hear about this until late. We didn't know that there was a distillery until recently. And I'm representing the Homes Association, the Spring Lake Homeowners Association. So consequently, I've got multiple inputs and they don't flow well, but bear with me. A homes association is primarily tasked with maintaining a residential development consistent with the goals of maintaining property values and quality of life. On that basis, the Spring Lake Homeowners Association stands firm against a distillery in the area for multiple reasons. First, any type of business situated in the middle of a rapidly growing middle-class neighborhood with more upscale homes ranging from approximately $250,000 to well over $500,000 can and does hurt property values. But a distillery would be more detrimental effect almost to the extent of the effect of an adult entertainment establishment as far as affecting property values. Secondary, this distillery wants to take advantage of an underground waterway that is an integral part of the entire section of this city and is the primary feed into the Spring Lake with a very delicate ecosystem that is home to some endangered species. And there is a high concern that a distillery could very adversely affect the ecosystem in multiple ways. I tried to drum up some pictures for some of the wildlife there, but I couldn't get them quickly. This is the most up-and-coming, fastest-growing residential neighborhood in the city, and interrupting that positive aspect would not only be damaging to the local area, but also damaging to the entire city of Murfreesboro. This part of the city has for a long time been in dire need of many city services such as improved policing, city maintenance of waterways under their responsibility, and local schools. The assigned elementary school is over 8 miles away, and there has been high hopes of an interchange over I-24 to cut that distance to less than half. But it seems that an interchange is only considered if it is to benefit. Well, we'll skip that. There are other options for this distillery that would not infringe on the people in such a drastic way. The Spring Lake Homeowners Association stands behind their property owners in submitting this very strong objection to the proposal that has no positive contribution to the area, but does have a long list of negative impacts. This proposal must be rejected to represent the voice of the people. Jumping on over. This is endorsed by the Homeowners Association Board of Directors and Property Management Company. The planned area is a natural stormwater runoff retention area. Our subdivision has some experience in the area and have learned that planning in the area can be very short-sighted and very inadequate, and as was the case in our own subdivision. Inadequate planning for appropriate stormwater runoff and retention areas can be disastrous. With hundreds, possibly thousands of new homes going up rapidly in the area, this becomes a serious concern even if a distillery was not being considered. Adding a proposed distillery to the mix makes this even more complex and compounds the concerns immensely. The particular body of water needs to be enlarged to accommodate those concerns, which leaves little room for any business that would only compound the problem. This being the natural low point, it would be impractical to even suggest diverting the water elsewhere. How are serious flooding issues being addressed?
Need to wind it up, please, sir.
I'm running out my 5 minutes already?
Yes, sir. It goes faster when you're having fun.
I'm having lots of fun. This underground waterway goes throughout the entire area. And I don't believe that this body of water that they're talking about, this lake, has been studied adequately enough, because it is an integral part of the underground waterway that is in the entire system. Our lake is identical to their lake. Our lake can fluctuate in levels drastic. It has a 30-foot change in its height, and it can rise 10 feet with one good rain. This underground water system, lots of stuff travels through that, and any problems could be perpetrated immensely. One last thought. This plan conflicts with the $750,000 million spent on a 2035 plan. All the residents of Spring Lake and the Spring Lake Homeowners Association would really appreciate a no vote on this. It is not in our best interest.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Anybody else?
Thank you for having us this evening. My name is Nathan Peterson. I live at 5216 Honeybee Drive in Thistle Downs. Ladies and gentlemen, if we go back a few years, a lot of us probably lost a lot of money during the housing crisis, myself being one. I lived outside of Charlotte, North Carolina at the time, and when I moved away from that area, had to essentially buy myself out of my mortgage for the new buyer to close on the home. I look at this commission, and your job is to protect the citizens through proper planning, through proper growth. Your job is to approve plans that will enhance the property values of the residents, not run the risk of degrading those values For that reason, I ask you to vote no on this proposition. It has not anything to do with a problem with a distillery in the city of Murfreesboro. It is a problem at this location. The risk is too great for all of these wonderful people here to put them at risk. I ask you to do your job and vote no. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Anybody else?
Mr. Chairman, you asked us to address you. I was wondering if I could ask you to, by a show of hands.
Would you start by giving me your name and address, sir?
Monty Kapavic, Crestmount Drive. I live about 1.5 miles as the crow flies from the facility that's...
Can you spell your last name for me, sir?
Kapavik. Mr. Chairman, may I ask that you request a show of hands for those who are opposed to this plan so that you as a body will see the
I think
opposition?
we pretty well know who's opposed to it.
I don't know, sir. Would you please ask?
We don't do that. So thank you.
Well, I'm opposed to it if anybody else is. Is this all we've got?
Sir, I asked you, said we don't do that, so thank you.
I understand. I want to know for myself, and I appreciate it. In August of 2014, the city of Murfreesboro set out on a plan to develop the city. It was called Murfreesboro 2035. It was to guide the city's growth for the next 20 years. It includes an exhaustive compilation of rules and guidelines bringing fairness and consistency to the process. Of course, you all are very familiar with it. In July of 2017, this council, this commission, adopted Murfreesboro 2035. I went through the minutes of this commission over the last few months since that was adopted. This commission has consistently adhered to Murfreesboro 2035 unless one of two things occurred. The dynamics changed or the adjacent properties were of similar zoning. Thistle Downs is a PUD, and the proposed change is a PUD as well. But there is a vast difference between a PUD with small lots for residential housing and a PUD that is going to have a whiskey distillery and manufacturing facility there. So I hope that this commission won't cloak the decision to approve this and that it's got a PUD adjacent to it. The other one, a dynamic change. One could argue that an interstate access would be a dynamic change. However, in Murfreesboro 2035, they acknowledged the exchange. They acknowledged the possibility that it would occur, and it was drawn in the plans. And they still maintained suburban residential zoning on this. So my request as a neighbor, one who's going to be impacted by this, is that you do not approve a change in the zoning to allow for a whiskey manufacturing facility.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Anybody else?
Hello. My name is Justina Erdman. I live at 2919 Junebug Drive. I have a husband, 2 kids, and 2 dogs, and they're both good. I just wanted to say we're not here to tell Mr. Smith what to do with his property. I understand people want to sell their homes, and hopefully we won't have to sell our homes. But we want you to look at us, the residents, begging you to please don't put this next to us because there are too many unknowns. I don't care what type of experts they bring and pay them to say what they say. There are too many unknowns, and unless this distillery exists and they can test it after it already exists, we will know what happens. We will know how it's going to affect it, and we brought you the materials to read because we know what has happened before. There have been lawsuits, and there were lawsuits for a reason. People, it affected everybody around the distillery. I wanted to point out a few things. Mr. Taylor mentioned the gas station. the gas station is not part of the Thistledown subdivision. It made it sound like we already have commercial. In our neighborhood, we do not. It's across the street. Adams Point subdivision is directly across from our subdivision. Matt Taylor also mentioned a temporary entrance on Asbury Road. If this entrance is there for 16 years, I don't believe I would consider that temporary. That 2035 plan may happen or may not happen. We don't know when that's going to happen. But for 16 years, we are going to have semis and tourists and everything else going through our neighborhood. I would encourage you to vote against that. I don't think you would want to live in a neighborhood that brings everybody from around the world to see the distillery and everybody going through your neighborhood. You know, we have a tight community, Thistledowns. Everybody watches everybody's backs. We know who comes, who goes, and we tell each other, you know, if there's a concern. This just adds to our worries. We have kids, we have dogs. There's too many things that may happen, and we just don't want it there. Another thing that was brought up in the September meeting, we asked why this location. Is it because of the quarry? And it's not. We asked that, and they told us no. It's the aesthetics. It's a beautiful place, and I agree, it is a beautiful place. But what might happen to this beautiful place when you put a whiskey distillery there? And effects of all of that to the residential areas around it. So I would encourage you to vote against it. There's plenty of people against it. I would like to point out the material that we gave you. There is a petition, electronic petition with almost 400 signatures. It's not just the neighborhoods surrounding this area. There are a lot of people that are concerned about this, a lot of people that disagree bringing commercial next to residential area. It does not belong there. There's plenty of space elsewhere. Murfreesboro is a great place to live, and your job is to do the best thing for Murfreesboro. We are Murfreesboro, and we encourage you to think of us when you make this decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Erdman. Anybody else?
Good evening. My name is Risa Lurie, L-U-R-I-E. I'm at 5326 Grassland Drive in the Youngstown subdivision. And you've heard from many of our friends in Thistledowns. I'd like to represent Youngstown. We're probably one of the first subdivisions off of Florence Road. I myself have been there for almost 20 years, and most of my neighbors have been there even longer. We're probably one of the first, and we've seen change. We're not opposed to change. We've seen farmland sold out to many, many subdivisions, but appropriate change. We are still a quiet neighborhood. We have no sidewalks. We have very few streetlights. The kids play in the street. People walk their dogs on the street. We meet our neighbors and talk to each other at the edges of our driveways. We don't want to have to look for traffic that's lost looking for a distillery coming to our dead end. Also, I know we've talked about this, the tree line that will block our view. 5-story barrel houses are not going to be blocked out by the trees that are at the end of my street, trust me. And when I entertain my neighbors in my backyard, I don't want to smell the corn coming from the distillery that we were told at the September meeting would be burned Monday through Friday from 8 to 5. I like my whiskey. I have no opposition to a distillery, but I don't want to see it when I walk out of my driveway. And I don't think it belongs in a neighborhood where the kids are playing in the street and don't have to worry about getting run over by something. There are many places in Murfreesboro that it would be more appropriate. And I realize Murfreesboro is growing quickly. I think it would be a great benefit to Murfreesboro, but in a different spot, not our residential neighborhood. And for my neighbors and myself, we are drastically opposed to the distillery. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
My name's Richard Davis. I live at 5138 Bumblebee Drive. I am the middle street in the neighborhood on the cul-de-sac. First of all, I did attend the September meeting. I have kept very involved with my neighbors and what's been going on, planning to be here at this meeting. One of the first things that Sazerac said to us was that they wanted to be good neighbors. I think we can give them an understanding that if they want to be good neighbors, then build somewhere else. Because as neighbors, we do not want to be their neighbors. Secondly, I'd like to point out that there are at least 3 more new developments that are going in on Florence Road. One of those, my understanding is going to go all the way through to Blackman and hold 280 homes, I believe it is. We have a subdivision going in next to us. There is another one farther up the road, and there's one down the other end of the road. The first one is right there at the bridges, the one I mentioned, the 280 houses. Florence Road is a 2-lane road. 2 lanes. Manson Pike that you run into is a 2-lane road. When you come up to Old Nashville Highway, it is a 2-lane road. I drive all those roads. I drive Old Nashville Highway coming down to Murfreesboro. I drive all the way over to Northwest Broad Street off of Florence Road. I go down Old Nashville almost every day going up to Antioch. I go down Manson Pike so I can get over to 840. I go down Manson Pike so I can get over to the Avenue, down to Sam's Club. I come there to Thistle Downs because there's a neighborhood across the street from me, and constantly have to be careful that I don't get in the turn lane because somebody else is going to be coming over there to turn left, and I want to turn left the other direction. It's busy, and with more traffic, it's going to become even more busy. And I don't understand how 2-lane roads are so good for semis. They are not extensively wide 2-lane roads. And there are going to be a lot of them they have to travel to get in and out of this location. I know you say you're going to plan to put this other road in, and I agree with my neighbors. We have no guarantee as to when or where or when that is going to happen. Another concern would be a sign. They are going to have to somehow advertise that this is where they are located. I would assume there will be a sign for Sazerac in front of our neighborhood, because that's the only place that it can be. There is no other land. I also would mention there are 3 entrances to our neighborhood. Now, what is going to keep somebody from missing the entrance they're supposed to go in and go around Asbury and going in one of the other entrances and driving around the neighborhood trying to figure out where in the world it is they're going? That means more traffic in our neighborhood. Another concern I have voiced is Honeybee, which is the main thoroughfare running right down the middle, ends up about 50 feet from Asbury Road, if that far. It stops at a cul-de-sac. Now, it's kind of interesting that this whole subdivision, the back of it has not been finished. There are lots back there that are marked off, but they have not had houses put on them. Now, how soon is it going to be before Mr. Waldron, who owns that land back there, is going to decide, well, I could connect Honeybee right on through to Asbury, and they'd have a straight shot back there to Sazerac. Then we've got semis coming right through the neighborhood. Can you stop that for us? Can you keep that from happening? I can see it happening. I walk Asbury Road. I get out most afternoons and try to walk. I have walked Asbury Road, I cannot tell you how many times. Once I discovered it was there because there's no traffic on it, and it is a bad road. It is potholed all over the place. I have to weave back and forth to keep out of the holes. It is not very well paved. And folks, the interstate is right over there where I can see it, trees and all. The houses, like they said, are 10 feet from Asbury Road. So how in the world are they going to widen it wide enough to house semis? Because right now you could not put 2 semis next to each other on that piece of road. The entrance to Asbury, as I understand, was put there through the neighborhood because that was an agreement with the contractor when you closed the other one that he would put that there so there was an entrance to Asbury Road. People lived back there, and I understand that. I don't have a problem with that. I do know one day I was walking through there, and here came a semi. Scared me half to death because I'm walking, there's no sidewalk, I'm walking on the road, and a semi is coming out.
Mr. Davis, you need to wind it up, please.
Okay, hoping he would see me. Those are my concerns, along with everything else that everybody has mentioned. And I have only lived there for 2 years. If I had known, I would not have bought my house there.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else?
My name is Ron Dennis. I'm at 5233 Honeybee Drive. I may be speaking ahead of my turn here. I want to speak to the ordinance, actually. Lots of requirements out there, federal, state, and local, for ethanol emissions. I want to ask that we put some teeth in this ordinance that's going to require Sazerac to meet the standards that they say they intend to meet. Matt said 5 ppms, 5 parts per million. What I'd like to propose is that be put into the, if it actually takes place, put it into the ordinance, that, and also in the ordinance, identify who will be responsible for sampling and testing, and who do they report to. Also, how often sampling and testing is required. Is the sampling and testing performed by a third-party testing agency? What happens if Sazerac does not meet that standard? Identify what happens then. Are they fined? If so, how much? Can they be shut down, forced completely, or just forced to move the barrel aging operations to another location? What I'm looking to do is put some teeth in this thing. So if this does occur, and I hope it does, and I really hope it does, and I'm opposed to this in every way for every reason that's been mentioned here already. But if this does take place, there has to be some teeth in this ordinance. Otherwise, it's a useless piece of paper. It means nothing. And
thank you, sir.
Thank you.
My name is Mike Singleton, Cicada Circle. I really wish I had some fancy handouts or maybe a PowerPoint presentation to overwhelm you people with, but I don't. All I have is my opinion. First of all, I want to thank you beautiful people for moving into our subdivision. We've been there for 12 years. For 8 to 9 years, the subdivision sat dormant. No construction. One of the fellows referenced losing money. We kind of just wallowed in where we were. 3 or 4 years ago, builders come in, started building, and you people were kind enough to invest your lives in our subdivision. And thank you. Because you've taken my property value and you've helped us to get to the point where when we sell, we're going to be okay. But I ask you to consider, if this is a great idea, would you want it in your neighborhood? And if the answer is yes, then I would encourage you to look for land and try to bring it. Because I think you've heard overwhelmingly the people that have spoken against this opportunity. The only person that spoke against it had a Woodbury address, and it's not a residence. We live there. There are kids. There are families. There are people that are investing their lives. Now, last thing I have to say, I'm figuring this ceiling is probably 12 feet high. The building's going to be 4 times the height of this ceiling. I don't know how fast Sazerac can grow trees, but if they're going to block the view, they better get started. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Singleton. Anybody else?
Good afternoon. I'm Jake Johnson, 5130 Bumblebee Drive. We have moved in approximately 4 years ago, a little bit over that. I can say on behalf of me and my wife, we would not have picked that property at that time. Start by telling you a little bit about myself. I'm a mechanical engineer from an accredited university. I've worked at multi-million and multi-billion-dollar companies, and I can honestly tell you there is no perfect company. I've witnessed deaths due to industrial accidents. I've witnessed dismemberments. I would venture to say if there's an industrial accident here, we're going to be seeing it on Channel 4 News as to why we have polluted groundwater, why we have a fireball seen from 24, why we have air pollution. I don't want to be part of that. Please vote no. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else?
I'm Clarence Strode, S-T-R-O-D-E, 5307 Honeybee Drive. We asked one simple request. If somehow this outlandish request by Sazerac is granted, we just ask that Sazerac and Matt put in writing that if one spore of Balderina crosses the fence line, they are financially responsible for mine and my neighbor's property, cleaning, damage, and any associated health problems down the line. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Strode. Anybody else? Last call. Okay.
Hello, my name is James Miller, M-I-L-L-A-R. That is the correct way to spell it, by the way. I live at 5115 Luna Moth Lane in the Thistledowns neighborhood. And we've heard this evening a lot of great facts and a lot of great figures. Mine is a personal appeal. The reason I moved into Thistledowns was I found out almost a year ago that my wife was pregnant with twins, and I already had 3 kids, so my house was not going to be big enough where I was before. So we went looking for the perfect place, and she had that in her mind, and she found it in Thistledowns. And so my twin boys, they're going to be a year old in March this year. I have a 4-year-old and a 3-year-old and a 12-year-old, so I have a full house. And it is as bad as you might think. But what I would like to make is a personal appeal. I had to uproot from my last home because my family was getting too big for it. And we found this place to be the perfect place for us, and they call it home now. And I don't want to have to uproot 5 children and myself and my wife for fear of their health and their safety over this project. So please vote no on this, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Miller, with an A. Anybody else? Last call, if you haven't spoken. Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. Mr. Taylor, and do you have anything to say, or do you have anybody that with the Sazerac group that would like to speak?
Yes, sir. We can do several things. The items that I had talked about traffic study and trucks. I'm not sure that I mentioned earlier, with the one shift, we anticipate approximately 4 to 6 trucks per day. Those will be coming during normal business hours of 8 to 5. If we were to go to 2 shifts, that number would approximately double to about 8 to 12 trucks per day. We did conduct a traffic study. We evaluated this site in more than one way. We evaluated it as it is today with our proposed use. That study showed that Asbury and the intersection with Florence had more than adequate capacity to handle any traffic generated by this site without the connection to the 5-lane Cherry Lane connector. We also evaluated this property as it was developed with 200 homes as a residential neighborhood, purely to show that our use is going to generate significantly less traffic than that residential neighborhood would in the long run. It's also worth noting that all those street stubs that we talked about us not connecting to with a residential neighborhood, those would most certainly be connected to, and you would have daily traffic from new people coming out of that new neighborhood down those streets. Whereas ours would temporarily, until that Cherry Lane connection is built, utilize Asbury, which will bypass 9 houses, none of which had started construction when we started this process. I do believe several have started now, though. That traffic study also considered if we connect to the 5-lane roadway, and that was just to show that we would not have a significant impact, and that road would have adequate capacity in the future, which it did. As far as the timing on the construction of that 5-lane connector road, we obviously do not control all that. We don't even touch the road directly. We have been willing to enter into that partnership or developer agreement with the city to accelerate that time frame, and are more than willing for that. We would prefer for that to happen sooner rather than later, and I think that is the city's intention as well. Somebody questioned whether we would actually remove our entrances onto Asbury and bring everything in the back way. We've already looked at that, and we're in complete agreement with that. We believe that with the natural areas we're preserving, the lake, the architecture, it will help to reinforce the campus theme. It'll be a winding road beside of a nice lake that we could accentuate and further enhance our visitor experience on the property. There were some questions about the use and withdrawal of the water from the lake for our uses on site, and those would obviously have to be permitted through the state. That is our desire. That is what the competitors that I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting do. They withdraw from a natural water source, and that would be our ideal situation, but obviously that has a permitting process to go through, which we would comply with. There was a question about who would be enforcing the ethanol testing and requirements. That's done by both the feds, the state. I think OSHA also has some consideration in that parts per million. So all those government oversight committees would be monitoring us there. I don't know exactly what the fines of that are. My guess is they have the ability to withdraw our operating license or distilling license, whatever that happens to be, which would obviously be the ultimate dagger, if you will. We're obviously not going to let that occur. Also, ethanol is really what we're trying to create and what we're trying to pass along to our ultimate buyer. So the more of that ethanol that we retain, the better we're doing our job, is one way to think about that. So we're obviously striving to get that number close to zero as we possibly can. There were several talks. I think somebody brought up possible drunk drivers. The state has very rigid limits on the amount of servings and how large those servings can be at each tasting. If you would like some very specific information about that, Ms. Elisa Hanley from SASRAC can speak to that. She's much more familiar with that law and those guidelines and criteria than I am personally. You want to speak to that?
Hi, I'm Elisa Henley. I'm one of the distillers with SASRAC. Mr. Taylor was correct. The state does regulate how much you can serve to a tourist coming to your facility. It's 0.5 ounces per SKU. I'll just give you an example. Say we had 9 different products. According to the state, we could give half of an ounce of each of those. However, our internal rules at SASRAC are more strict than that, where nobody would be served more than 1.5 ounces of any product. So we hold ourselves accountable for that. Our staff is highly trained in serving, just like you would do in a restaurant with a bartender or there's any alcohol available. We also reserve the right of refusal to anyone. So we would never serve anyone that we think is intoxicated or in any kind of condition not to be served. We would also control that.
Thank you, ma'am.
I believe there was a question of if honeybee would be extended out. My answer to that would be that that is a PUD. as well. If they wanted to extend that out, they would have to come back before this body, so you obviously control that 100%. My guess is why he has not built those is he had more lots, and he will build those as soon as he develops out his other lots. Trying to see. I believe that was all the questions that I had, with the exception of some clarifications on the mold studies, and I'll be happy for Ms. Ann Pringle to come up and address those directly to you, unless you've got other questions for me right now. Maybe I missed something.
Planning Commission members, do you have any questions for Mr. Taylor?
What about signage?
Yes, I missed that one. So we obviously would not be able to have a sign at the corner of Asbury and Florence. That would be considered an off-premise sign, which I believe Murfreesboro does not allow. We don't even have any interstate frontage because of the way Asbury is constructed, so we could not do an interstate sign, if I understand the way the sign ordinance works. So our signage will be constricted to our access points at public rights-of-way. So we're not, we're more than likely not going to get the passerby. We are very much a destination type area. Any passerby that we would be getting, we'd be advertising on the interstate on some of those signage. Down the road. Somebody did question and say that we'd indicated at the neighborhood meeting that the quarry was not the reason we'd be here. I believe what we said was the quarry was one of the reasons we'd be here. Sazerac is very excited about Murfreesboro, the growth. They are very excited about the opportunity to possibly co-brand this with the area, and we like the area. Because we would be the first stop, potential stop coming down I-24 for this sort of use. We'd be on the Whiskey Trail that Tennessee has implemented and began, and we would be the first stop coming out of Nashville down 24 for that. So there are lots of reasons why we want to be at this property. The quarry is one of those. Any others?
Matt, we talked about the Type D buffer and supplementing areas that weren't at such a vegetation height. Initially, what would be the height of whatever vegetation you would plant?
So I believe that a Type D typically requires basically a double row of staggered evergreens, and I believe those evergreens are typically in the 6 to 8 foot height range. So at planting, they'd be in the 6 to 8 foot height range. And most of those bare areas or thin areas, they are not completely void of vegetation. They are thin, I would say. And that might be thin up top, that may be thin down bottom. So we'll try to address each one of those in the appropriate manner. Obviously, some of those are going to take some grow-in period, but we also have distance to try to help that as well.
Kind of along the same lines of the height, there was a reference to 5-story buildings, but I believe I read there was a maximum height of all the properties on site of 50 feet. Is that correct?
It's 66, and those would be the barrel warehouses on the opposite side. And those are, from a structural standpoint, the barrel warehouses are a 1-story building, but if you've been inside a barrel warehouse, they've got ricks, wooden ricks, and so that's where they're referring to multiple stories, but from a structural standpoint, they are 1 story, and those would be up to 66 feet tall.
Thank you.
Okay. Why don't you have your speaker come up?
Yes, sir. And Ms. Pringle does have some pictures she would like to put up on the TV screen. If we could put this computer back up there. Dr. Pringle, I should say.
I just want to start by thanking you all for the time that you're going to take to listen to me. Thank you for having me here and for listening. My name is Ann Pringle. I just want to introduce myself a little bit because I haven't met all of you. I'm a mycologist. That means I'm a biologist, and my specialty is fungi. I study fungi. That's what I do. And I've been studying fungi for more than 20 years. I started out, I have my PhD from Duke University. I have a joint degree in botany and genetics. I moved from Duke to the University of California at Berkeley. I spent about 10 years at Harvard running a lab. And now I'm at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where I'm in the department, I'm the Vilas Distinguished Achievement Professor in the departments of botany and bacteriology, and that's who I am. And from here on out, I'm going to use the word fungi more than I'm going to use the word mold. The word mold is used by lots of different people to mean really pretty different things. It's fairly imprecise. Fungi is a more general, I think that's really what we're talking about here. We're talking about fungi. And I also do want to note that the reason that I'm here from Madison, Wisconsin is because Sazerac flew me down here. But the thoughts and the opinions and the summaries of the data that I'm giving you, those are mine. So I want to start by pointing out that fungi grow everywhere. So anywhere there's a surface and there's moisture and there's the right temperature, you're going to see fungi grow. I've worked in a lot of different places in the world. There just isn't a surface that doesn't have, that doesn't have fungi on them. Also, because I think the word fungus can be a kind of an odd word. It's not a word we use in everyday conversation. I just want to point out that there are a lot of fungi that we use in our daily lives for our own benefit. So if you've ever baked bread and used yeast, if you've ever put ethanol in your car, ethanol is a fuel that comes from plants, but it's fungi that turn the plants into fuel. If you've ever used a laundry detergent that's color brightening or for cold water, a lot of the enzymes in those laundry detergents come from fungi. So it's not an automatic fear provoker when you use the word fungi. There are a lot of helpful fungi. It's also true that a lot of fungi are black, not just a few species. Tens of thousands of species, when they grow, you see that they're black. So you can't make a decision about what a fungus is just by looking at it and seeing that it's black. How do I get to the photos, actually? Okay. So along the lines of fungi grow in any habitat that's suitable, I want to show you some pictures. Make the clicky thing go away. Thank you. These are photographs that are taken on site, either at the site of the proposed distillery in Murfreesboro or at other distilleries that I've traveled in throughout the world. With the photograph that you're looking at on the right as you face these pictures is from Kentucky. It's quite close to a distillery. The photograph on the left is a photograph that you can see if you walk in the neighborhood that's near the proposed distillery. It's just close to that property. And you can see there are black growths on the metal sign on the left. There are black growths on the metal signs on the right. And if you care to walk in these neighborhoods in Murfreesboro near the proposed distillery and you take a Q-tip and you get it wet and you swab that sign on the left or you swab a lot of the other surfaces in there, the Q-tip will come away black because there are molds there. And I think, my family's from North Carolina, and, people, you can see this on any kind of surface around you in states like North Carolina, Tennessee. There are black growths there. Here's another surface I want to show you.
Use the page down.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So this is those are metal signs that you were looking at. These are a more plasticky kind of substrate. Again, the photograph on the right is taken in Kentucky near a distillery. The photograph on the left is taken, I believe, at a location that we might have even been discussing here tonight. You can see that there are black growths. Now, if you were to do some kind of sampling and look inside, if you were to ask what species of fungi are there inside of these black growths, and I've done a lot of that, I just want to address the literature that's come up. That literature is based on a really old-fashioned protocol where biologists go and they try to look and see what they can grow, what they can culture. But what's true is that most of the diversity of fungi, most species of fungi, you can't grow in a petri dish. And so I'm not using those culture-based techniques. I'm using DNA sequencing technologies. And that's really the modern methodology that you use now to describe biodiversity. So I extract DNA and I sequence it. So when I'm giving you information about what grows inside these molds, that's how I'm doing it. So it's really different from how other people have talked about these things. So this is a tree that's on, it's near the lake. You can see the lake in the background, and it's black. And it's black because it has mold growing on it. So there's no distillery here, but this tree is here. And if you scrape and you look and see what's inside this black growth, you will find dozens, sometimes hundreds of species of fungi growing in this black growth. And it's just a world, I think, that we're only beginning to understand. It's some of you might have heard the word microbiome. It's a microbiome. So that's on the side of the distillery, and I'll just show you another. And I'm trying to give you a sense of the different kinds of substrates that are here. Here's another image. This is a plant that was nearby. If you ran your hands along those fronds, they would come away black. And maybe some of you have even seen this in your own yards on your ornamentals, that they turn black. They have this black mold on them. And that's just common. It's frequent. There's nothing to be worried about. That's a thing that happens. And you can find it, in your hands. I do it all the time. So there are molds, there are fungi, there are black growths. Here are homes in surrounding neighborhoods. These are pictures that I took from walking around the sites, and you can see. And if you power wash that, it'll come clean. I'm guessing, again, that a lot of people in this room have had the experience of power washing a surface, and it comes clean. Here's another image of a house in a surround not far from the Citgo station, and it's covered in black growths. And that's just, and the longer you leave a surface, and obviously different exposures are going to have different amounts of growth, the southern exposure versus a northern exposure. But these are just a part of the world around us. So I also want to talk about the human health risk, and I think maybe the most useful thing I can say is that there's a long history of humans living with distilleries. So you can think of Scotland, where there are Scotch distilleries, and obviously there are hundreds of different kinds of Scotch that you can buy if you go to a liquor store. And each of those different kinds of Scotch is associated with a distillery. That's been happening. You can think of cognac in France. You can even think of bourbon in Kentucky. Those distilleries have been around not just for a few years. So there's a long history of cohabitation of humans and distilleries, and there's no evidence that a distillery harms human health. That's just not a part of the discussion. And I want to conclude by just talking very specifically about the whiskey mold that's come up several times. The scientific name for that is Baudinia. I've read the literature on Baudinia really carefully, and I've done my own sampling. And I just want to remember again that the literature that's been published to date, it really comes from a few people who use this really outdated technique to study it. When I look at those black molds on a distillery property, sometimes I find Baudinia, but sometimes I don't. And even if I find Baudinia, I find lots of other species growing in the black growths that you can see. It's not just a single, it's not one species growing there. It's a world growing there. And if you sample away from distilleries, I've only ever found trace amounts of Baudinia. I find lots of other species. Again, I find these, so you can sample this and you can look inside it. This is in a surrounding neighborhood, and there are lots of things in there, but it's not an overgrowth of Baudinia. And I would just say that after having studied this for quite a long time now, that I would like to just inject or maybe try to gently say to you, calmly say to you that I don't think that you're going to have any more black growth in your neighborhood after this distillery might be built, if this distillery is built. You're not going to have any more of it than you have now when you walk around your neighborhood and you look around. And there's no health risk. There's no one I've ever talked to that studies fungi or studies Baudinia has ever suggested that there's a health risk coming from Baudinia. And I would be really glad to answer any other questions that you might have about this.
Okay, Planning Commission members, do you have any questions? Very interesting, very good job.
Great explanation, thank you.
Kathy, do you have a question?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Taylor, do you have anything else?
No, we don't have anything specific left on my list. Unless I missed something, we'd be happy to answer any other questions, comments, concerns that you might have from you or staff.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Huddleston.
Chairman Lamb, yes.
Mr. Huddleston represents the city engineering department, and a lot of our comments tonight have been based on traffic on Asbury Lane and the problems associated with it. Kind of give us a time frame for what you see in your crystal ball as far as the construction of the new road that would eliminate Asbury Lane as a entrance to this proposed development.
Sure, be glad to do that. I would like to approach the podium just to be able to use some graphics there, if that would be helpful to all of us, I think.
And I believe also down your alley would be questions about signalization, traffic lights that were brought up.
Yes, sir. I think we'll be prepared to answer those. I don't have all the notes here in front of me, but I think between Marina and Mr. Whitaker and the members of the Planning Commission, we've certainly made quite a few notes on traffic. You know, there's a lot of discussion about the 2040 plan and the adoption of that. And as we started that process a few years ago with our consultant, with our staff team, we looked at this area and it's close to everything, but at the same time it's close to nothing. And by that I mean you've got 840 in your back door, you have I-24 in your back door, but you really can't get access to them. And then if you try to get over to Broad Street, occasionally you get caught by the train. And so, you know, the neighborhoods there around 840 and 24, Florence Road serves them. We rebuilt Florence Road with a partnership with the county a few years ago to help that. Old Nashville Highway is also a source of access to that area, but it's also limited in its capabilities. And so one of the things that we did in this area is we looked at how those roadways are operating today. Florence Road, Old Nashville Highway, and Manson Pike. Florence Road's operating on an average daily traffic at a level C, a level of service. Manson Pike is at a level of service C. Brinkley Road is at a level of service of B. Let's see, Old Nashville Highway is operating at a level of service of C currently. And then we applied the 2035 land use recommendations to this area. We generated trips, and we said if we do nothing else in this area, what happens to those road networks? And this included the projection of this particular site being used as residential. And what that study, what that modeling showed us was without improvements, Florence Road falls to a level F. And just like in school, we didn't like Fs in school, and we don't like Fs in level of service. And then some of the supporting roads there, Old Nashville Highway, also at a level of service of F. And then level of service E, which is only slightly better, but still below our standards where we like to be. We don't like to see our roadways fall below D, and not have a way to help that. And so what I would say is that if we do nothing traffic-wise here and our growth patterns continue, the road networks out there are not going to be adequate to serve the growth in the future. That was the emphasis, that was the plan, that was what we wanted to understand in the 2040 transportation plan. And so with our consulting team and city staff and other stakeholders who participate in this, we started analyzing each one of these proposed road projects. And so with the recommendation of the 2040 plan, and it's here on the screen, and just for our benefit tonight, that's the Sazerac site. Here would be Florence Road, and of course you recognize I-24 and 840. Old Nashville Highway would be here. This is Blackman Road coming down to the Manson Pike intersection here. So that gives us a little bit of foundation there. But with those projects, we maintain the levels of service of those existing road networks that I mentioned: Florence Road, Old Nashville Highway, Manson Pike. We maintain those levels of service at D or better with those road improvements. And so there's some discussion about, does 2035 or does 2040 mean that's how long before these projects come on board? But really what we did was we prioritized those based on the information we had at the time into short-term, mid-term, and long-term. And so what I will tell you, Chairman, is that before the ink was dry on the minutes where you guys approved this, city staff was already working to pursue projects that were on that 2040 list. So this isn't the list we wait till 2040 and implement, but it really started before those projects were fully presented and adopted by you. And so we're pursuing those. Occasionally there'll be projects of opportunity that come along where we create a great opportunity for a public-private partnership, and I think that's where we're at today. One of the things that I noted in the looking back in the 2040, looking back at our road history, the city has spent some $350 million in the last 21 years to improve roads. Actually, I say that we've seen $350 million invested in our community, but of that, the city's only spent about 50%. So our contribution to that's been 50 cents on the dollar, but our community has benefited from that construction. And so the public-private partnership's been a strong part of our road building history. And the projects that are queued up now, the same thing, about 50%. And so what we would see here is an opportunity to have a public-private partnership that would participate in phase one of this road network. And I'm going back to the map here, Chairman, to just show you that phase one, we're really looking at that area right there to build from Florence Road, really to create an access over to the site. And Sazerac has offered, in lieu of improvements to Asbury Road, they've offered to instead of spending those dollars on Asbury Road, to spend those equivalent dollars on a joint project. We have the ability also to, and have contacted a couple of the property owners. There turns out there's 3 or 4 property owners between here and Florence Road, and we've approached them about a roadway development agreement. They've been receptive, and so we've got some work to do on that, but our goal would be to bring to the mayor and council perhaps in the time frame of public hearing and second reading there, to bring to the mayor and council a road funding agreement that would see the city and the applicant here tonight, and then other landowners there who would benefit from that roadway participate in a joint funding agreement where we could actually fund the roadway design and construction and then actually see it built in a time frame that would be consistent with the development of the property. Obviously, there's a lot of work we've got to do on that, and we would need the approval of the mayor and council to do that. But it's my goal to see this project develop concurrently with the applicant's development of their site, so that perhaps in the very early stages of their operation, this roadway would be available. It's through undeveloped properties. The right-of-way we would expect to be donated, and then the city would fund the construction with the repayment of some of those costs to occur later. And so our goal would be to see this first leg built. What I'll also tell you is that we're as serious as we can be about the interchange, and so as a part of that study, we'd really like to be able to, and our plan is to develop a roadway plan a planning level document that would take us really from Broad Street with the extension of Cherry Lane that's currently a committed project all the way to Burnt Knob, Manson Pike, and Blackman Road. And so we'd like to study this route, and specifically we need TDOT and Federal Highways approval of an interchange there. So we also need to conduct an interchange justification study. There's a new name for that, but basically we need to convince the federal and state transportation officials that this location warrants an interchange. And so it has to be a regionally significant road network. That's why we want to see it connected to proposed Cherry Lane. That's why we need to see it connected into the Manson Pike area. That's why we need to see it connected to Old Nashville Highway, so that it would not just benefit the neighbors, although I think this Florence Road community would benefit greatly from access that's proposed here, but also benefit our region, that's this corridor around Murfreesboro. So the question on timing is, realistically, we'd like to be able to see this project authorized by the mayor and council in about the same time as this matter would be coming before them for annexation or rezoning.
Okay. Planning Commission members have questions for Mr. Huddleston?
Mr. Huddleston, I have one. So with the hopes of this happening concurrently, let's just say for whatever reason it doesn't happen in exactly that time frame, and I haven't been down Asbury Road. I'm just going by the comments that have been made tonight. So who is going to make or are there going to be any improvements to Asbury Road if, in fact, the Sazerac has to use that as an entrance in the interim?
So, Mr. Halliburton, I think I'd like to maybe dissect Asbury Road into two components. There's a component that goes through Thistle Downs. That was built by the developer of Thistle Downs. It was built to a commercial standard. So that part of Asbury Road meets our current commercial street standard. The Thistle Downs PUD includes, I think, maybe about 200 to 250 feet of frontage along Florence Road that has commercial type uses. Neighborhood services, I think some of the speakers addressed that tonight, that there is neighborhood services there on Florence, and the Thistledown PUD includes that. So that section is designed to commercial standards. It meets our city commercial street standards. The developer of Thistle Downs is obligated to put the final topping on that. We're holding a surety, a bond, if you will, to guarantee its completion. The balance of Asbury Road is a frontage road. It was designed and built by TDOT to preserve access to frontage properties along I-24 that were impacted by I-24 when it was built through our community, and then it was modified somewhat when 840 was built because of the location of the interchange on-ramps and off-ramps. And it's not a very good road. We're not proud of that roadway, but it also has a very low service volume today. But it also maintains access to properties other than the site, and so for that reason, Asbury Road needs to stay in place as a public road. Were we to see improvements to what we're calling Phase 1, from the engineering department standpoint, I would not envision any significant improvements on Asbury Road. But I do believe that for the nature and use of the property, and then how it continues to access other properties in that area, that needs to remain open for secondary access, or it needs to remain open for emergencies, and that roadway would serve a benefit to our community if it remained open, but really not improved or not increase the level of traffic on it significantly than what's happening there today. And I think there was also a question about signalization of intersections on Florence Road. I think the Phase 1 plan that we have would include a plan for signalization where it would propose to intersect with Florence Road. And I'll go back to the map here and maybe just circle that right there. and just say that we would plan it for a signal, but it would likely not meet the warrants for a signal even with the operation that's proposed here. But certainly as the traffic counts would increase at that location, we would look to those traffic counts to let us know that a signal's warranted there. I do not foresee a signal short term, at least, at Asbury Road and Florence Road to serve those neighborhoods, and I'm not sure that a signal would necessarily warrant there in the future, based on the projections that we understand today.
Would the Asbury Road connection support construction traffic?
Yes, I do believe it would. The one gentleman who spoke said, that they do meet. They have seen tractor trailers on there, and what I will say is that I think they're the farm use and the billboard use out through there demand from time to time heavier equipment than you would normally see on that. But those are very sporadic. But I do believe it would support construction traffic, and it is a city street, and our obligation to maintain that, including the maintenance of the pavements. And so that's something we would monitor as well.
Good.
Again, just to follow up, so if this was approved, I mean, is there a way that we could persuade or require the developer to go ahead and put the final topping on this so that the roadway is improved to satisfaction of being able to get these trucks in and out of Sazerac?
And I think maybe you're talking about when we divided Asbury into its two components today, the new section, which is still under bond. What we look for is a 75% build out there. I don't have the latest numbers with Thistle Downs, but quite suspect it's not yet at 75, but it certainly may get there soon. And then we also want to make sure that no additional road cuts need to be made there. Encourage, I think we could probably encourage, but I think the bigger question on Thistle Downs topping is not necessarily just that small section of Asbury, but the complete subdivision.
I see.
And what a developer would normally do is contract for all of those. These are in two sections, sections 3 and 4. And from a procedural standpoint, they want to put all of that street network into the warranty period at the same time so that clock starts running. And so maybe is a question of not whether we just do Asbury, but is the developer ready to do, say, for example, here, I think this is section 3 that includes this section of Asbury. And if he's ready to do that, we'll certainly be prepared for him to do that. I would not anticipate anything happening on the topping until, obviously, the next paving season, which would be in the spring or summer.
Okay. Any other questions?
I just want to clarify that you said the 5-lane road could be on a different schedule than the actual interchange itself.
Yes, the 5-lane roadway, the phase 1, as we described it to you, that's a local project. We certainly have the authority to design, bid, and build that. The interchange, on the other hand, is another matter, and it does require TDOT approval and then also concurrence with federal highways. The interstate system in Tennessee is a federal system. The operation and maintenance of that system is performed by TDOT under the guidance of federal highways, and so when we ask for access to interstates, it requires federal highways to act on that. The first step of that for a local community is the advanced planning report and interchange justification study, and we look to authorize those activities along with a design contract and funding agreement that would see phase 1 built and designed. Interchanges, as we know, can take years before you get approval and actual authorization to construct. Cherry Lane's an example of that. Best early guess would be that it's a very aggressive schedule would be 5 years. A more likely schedule would be 10 years.
So if the road were complete, can you utilize, would the northern entrance be feasible at that time? You would still likely route traffic that way?
Yes, ma'am. Our connection to that road and use of that entrance and the disuse of the other two are not linked to the interchange construction. They are purely linked to the construction of the phase one, as Mr. Huddleston has referred to it as.
Okay.
And so I think, for the Planning Commission's consideration, the planning of an interchange there, the pursuit by the city of that interchange location, it really changes the dynamics in this area. It changes the dynamics for traffic, certainly, and our 2040 plan demonstrates the need. If we don't have access to the roadways that are shown on our diagram here, if we can't see those improvements made, our Florence Road starts failing, Old Nashville Highway starts failing, and gets really to undesirable levels of service. And so I think the city's past, the history that we've had in pursuing projects and interchanges and these types of joint developments, I think that history speaks well to us pursuing the plans we've laid out. And when we brought this before the Planning Commission and then before the City Council for adoption, we intend to bring that back to Planning Commission and Mayor and Council and as projects and programs to see these projects constructed. And I think our past track record would bode well for our plan for implementation of that. And but really, the interchange is a game changer for that property and for the surrounding community, the surrounding areas, as far as transportation and land use. And I think that's something that we want to bring to your attention tonight on the program for the interchange and the roadway improvements in this area.
Okay. Anything else from Mr. Huddleston?
Chairman, I'd like to point out there was a question on the 2035 plan for this area and the dynamic. I think Mr. Kapavic said dynamic changes. The one thing I'd like to point out is when KKC did our land use map, it was a 30,000-foot view. We could not afford to pay KKC to come in and basically look at our entire urban growth boundary and do if you will, a plan for our entire city. What they did do, and a part of their element is the 2040 transportation plan, they had to have the land use map to get that started. So what they did is the roads that were in construction phase or that we knew were soon to be on board, they actually looked at those a little closer than they did the ones that were maybe 10 years out. This area was looked at as farmland. What the intent of that land use plan and the transportation plan is to give staff tools to look at that property. The road is a significant player in the use of the farmland that's out there today. And what I mean by that is if you think back for Veterans Parkway, Rutherford Boulevard, Joe B. Jackson Parkway, all of those roads that have been constructed has changed land use, dynamically changed the land use. This property, without the extension to Cherry Lane, there's no doubt is residential property. With the interchange, with a 5-lane road, that property is not really set up for residential use. It's set up for more of a commercial use, higher density, some type of townhome, multifamily, other uses. Now, that will be determined as developers come to us. We'll look at that, they will study that, but what we do know is this road and an interchange is not conducive for residential development in that area. We look at land for the best use of that land, and if you think about it, interchanges are typically driven by commercial uses, and this road is a significant player. And as I said earlier, I think you used the word dynamic. It is a dynamic change to this area out there. If the road was not on our major transportation plan, now this development can possibly move that up on the clock, which happens. When developments come in, that sometimes will expedite a development that was proposed 10 years down the road that can be moved up. And I think that's what you're seeing here. Let's see if I had anything else. I think Mr. Holston had explained the Asbury Road. Part of the planned development does, and some of the staff's comments when the plan book came in, some of our comments was regarding the addition of this proposed future 5-lane road and tying that to the planned development. I just wanted to point those out.
Okay. I had one other question, Mr. Taylor, I meant to ask you a while ago. In talking about the water that's in the lake right now, with the proper permits from the state, you'll be removing water from that lake for your use. Are you putting anything into the lake at all?
So it depends on how the permits go, but I think our anticipation would, whatever we bring out, we would put back in, but obviously it would have to go through the proper treatment and cleaning and temperature control process, but our permit may dictate that it goes back to the sanitary sewer.
Okay, so that will be part of the permitting
yes, sir.
Process as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Chair Lamb, I had a couple of responses as well, if you wish. One of the questions that came up was regarding noise, and once this property would be annexed into the city, it would be subject to the city's noise ordinance, and so they would not be able to violate that. It would have to comply just like anywhere else in the city. One of the other comments was regarding setting specific limits of the emissions into the ordinance, and I think they meant the plan book. As the applicants had indicated, they're going to be subject to permits from the state of Tennessee regarding emissions, and that is the guiding light. So they would have to obtain that permit and then follow that permit. So that is the appropriate location and not in the ordinance itself. And then the last one that I had was, could the specific hours of operation for each operation be stated? And I would have to put that back to the applicant to see if that would be something they could actually specify in the plan book or the pattern book, as it's just it's overarching right now for all the uses. And that's it.
Okay. Any other comments from members of the Planning Commission?
Matt, do you want to address this whole hour thing?
So the hours of operation that we have listed are obviously when we would anticipate workers being there. The events would possibly run up to 11. So we can break that down further. We'll be happy to give more detail on that. We would have to, if you tell us exactly what you want broke down, because the warehousing, the bottling, and the distillery function will all really kind of function as one, and those would be the normal work hours of 8 to 5 or 6 to 10. The event, the tours would be obviously on a tighter schedule than that. I don't think they would start at 8. They'd start more toward midday when your tourists may start to get there and run to the evening time. So we could break down each one of those and put them in the book. I don't think that would be a problem.
You have any questions?
I have a few questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Taylor. Just in general in the plan book, if we're, going to go ahead and look at all these, the details in the book, just some things about, did we have any, anything in the plan book, or maybe it was in the extra stuff that was handed out today, that shows us anything about the silos and what they would look like, just typical look of those?
We did. I don't think that we put pictures of those. We did have a statement on page 16 that the silos would have metal facades to match the other buildings. We would use the same kind of material.
I would probably want some more in the book or something, just to
Okay.
confirm what that's gonna actually, what that would be, what that would look
Some more
like.
pictures of the silos or.
An
all right.
example. And I was trying to really figure out, so like, if I look at, this page 16 and 17.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
we've got some nice examples and pictures on page 17. And then the full view of the building is on page 16.
Yes, ma'am.
But we don't see anywhere like what a true elevation would be of the building if we're looking at it. Like I think I'm used to seeing that when we look at plans. Just at site plan, I'm not going to see that in here.
Yeah, what we've tried to do is give form, because we don't know exactly where every door, because these are a little bit different than your generic retail buildings, if you will, because we're going to obviously have a lot of intricacies on the inside of the building that are going to dictate where windows can be and where doors can be, and a lot of that won't be able to be decided until you actually do the engineering on the inside of the building where each individual component would be. So what we wanted to do was outline basically what the mass of the building would look like, and then the set forth the building materials, and then we'd bring the actual design of what the skins of these buildings are going to look like, where every door is going to be, every window, back at the site plan review process when we can give you an accurate depiction of that.
And you would only be able to use these materials that you're showing.
Yes,
right
ma'am.
here.
If it's not in here, then we won't be able to use it unless it's considered a higher quality, but I'm not sure what the higher quality of this would be.
So like on page 20, where we're looking at the charcoal pavilion,
Yes, ma'am.
so the two pictures at the bottom, are those two different pictures of what a charcoal pavilion might look like, or is, because
It is. They're general examples of what those, we would try to integrate the stone at the columns, but then it may, I don't know whether it would have a single sloped roof or it could possibly have a hipped or a pitched roof both ways. There is what he's trying to depict. So it could be an either or right there, given a little bit of flexibility.
But then they could all look like the picture on the left.
Well, we're only going to have one of them, but they would all.
That's right. There's one of those. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. So certainly, if you like the one on the right, we can strike the one on the left.
Well, there's just a big difference there, and it's just kind of that type thing in here. And I understand where you're trying to go with it, but I don't want to have all the pretty pictures and then it ends up being the one that was the more
Yes, ma'am.
plainer picture.
We'll take the one on the
Since they're
left.
both in there.
We'll take the one on the left out.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm good now. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll ask. Matt, we talked about the barrel warehouses, I believe, being no more than 66 feet in height.
Yes, sir.
On page 16, it talks about building accessory structures shall not exceed 75 feet. Does that mean the silo is going to be 75 feet?
No, I think that was a reference back to the ordinance, so we can, we'll change that to 66 to be consistent, because the warehouses are the tallest structure on the site, so we'll change that to 66.
Do you know the height of the silos?
They are. So we have one silo at the charcoal storage. We anticipate that being about 20 feet tall. And then the grain silos, we anticipate having 4 of those, and we've estimated those at 10 feet tall.
Mr. Taylor, so can you just tell me, for example, when you all originally, or maybe when they came to you, for a distillery, what makes the ideal site? Was it what were they looking for? Was it an actual? Is it the size, and is it the access to the interstate? What are those things that make the ideal site for a distillery? Since we haven't had one before, and I don't really know what they look for.
Yes, ma'am. So a distillery can be in multiple locations. I just got back from a trip to Louisville area. There they've got a lot of urban type distilleries. They've got some that are moving downtown. They're smaller in nature. They're not going to produce the volumes that we're talking here. Those are more geared toward a touristy to build those brands, because all the brands that are going downtown have larger facilities outside of town. And so at a location like this, it was, I think, the lake that was a big draw. The location, because of being first on the interstate coming out of Nashville, and then just the general community as a whole is what they've told me why they were attracted to this property. I think all those speak well to Murfreesboro, and the lake itself is obviously a huge asset for this particular project.
So when you saw distilleries in an urban area, were they actually just like the visitor center?
I think it's a mixture there. You've got some that are actually operational, that are actually producing, and then you've got others that are more of a visitor center where it may be kind of a mock thing, or they're just selling their brand, such as they're selling their product, or they're selling maybe a tour with pictures. I didn't go through any of those, but we did hear a little bit about it while we were there.
Okay.
And I will tell you, while I was there, we visited 4 different locations. All of them had residential in fairly close proximity, some of which had barrel warehouses that were housing as much as 60,000 barrels apiece, and you had houses directly across the street. These are very serene environments, very serene campuses, generally very quiet from my experience, and they're not noise producers. Somebody said, why not in my backyard? I wouldn't mind having something like this built next door to me. At least I know who my neighbor is going to be, rather than they may sell and change.
Please.
So I'll tag on to some questions Kathy's asking there. I'll make a statement. You can tell me if I'm incorrect in this. But it seems to me in general that the site is larger than it would need to be, which actually warrants a nice ability to bring some of the buildings inside of the site a little bit, push the more invasive ones further away from the residential areas. Obviously, you wouldn't have to have a lake, so it adds a lot more acreage to the site. The ability to keep all of the existing green space kind of helps with the buffer site. So in general, 55 acres is probably more than what would be required to run this business. Is that right?
I would say that's accurate, based on our footprint, because I think we've estimated that we're impacting about 30% of the property, if I remember correctly, and so that's about a 70% trade-off.
Okay. Any more questions for Mr. Taylor? Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you.
Any comments from the Planning Commission?
I'll start. I had an opportunity to go to the Jack Daniel's distillery in 2017, first time I'd ever been, even though I've lived in Tennessee the majority of my life. And I'll be the first one to say that we drove by some of these barrel warehouses, and then once we got into the visitors area, I saw this whiskey mold or whatever, the fungi on the buildings itself. And so I asked, what was causing, why was it there? And it had to do with the making of the whiskey itself. I did notice, and this is long before this application came up, as we were driving back after I found out what it was and why it was there, I looked around to see if it was on the other buildings, like it impacted the barrel warehouses and the buildings that were on site at Jack Daniels, and I didn't see it. I can't speak to the expert that spoke. I'm not a scientist. I'm just going by what I saw when I went to Lynchburg. I'm also not a scientist to sit here and say that mold is going to impact anyone's health. I think we've got to go by, granted, this person was a representative of the applicant, but we hope that the information that we're given is correct information. Many of you mentioned that you're not necessarily against the distillery, but you don't want it next to your neighborhood. I honestly think the distillery would be a positive thing for Murfreesboro. I do get where, if I live right next to it, the apprehension based upon the information that's been presented. But all that being said, I think that with their agreement to help with the development of the extension of Cherry Lane, that hopefully the entrance through Asbury Road, if it at all, will be short-lived. So I'm going to vote for this application.
Any other comments? Okay, we are charged by the state charter to hold this planning commission and a meeting and hear public input, and our goal tonight is to formulate a recommendation to the city council. That's all we're doing tonight is formulating a recommendation, whether it's a positive recommendation or a negative recommendation. It will go to the city council, who will hold another public hearing and make the decision on whether to approve, disapprove, or modify in some way. So that being said, if there's no other comments or questions, we're ready for a motion. What are the wishes of this commission?
I move for approval.
I'll second it.
Motion is made for approval and seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? The motion carries. We have one more public hearing tonight, and that is the proposed amendments to the zoning ordinance regarding Section 2, interpretation and definitions, Chart 1, uses permitted by zoning district, and Chart 4, required off-street parking and queuing spaces by use as regards to distilleries. City of Murfreesboro Planning Department is the applicant.
All right, thank you.
Marina?
The City of Murfreesboro zoning ordinance proposes modifications to the text for three things. First, to establish a definition for the land use alcoholic beverage manufacturing. This would be included in the definition section. I won't read it for purposes of timing as it was presented in the package. The second thing that this ordinance is proposing to do is to establish this use within Chart 1. We're proposing it as a permitted use in the HI district, which is the heavy industrial. And the third thing this ordinance text change would do is to establish endnotes for Chart 1 for this use regarding development standards. Staff has made some text clarifications and corrections to the draft ordinance that was included in your packet, and Attorney David Ives just passed out the proposed revisions for your consideration. The Planning Commission will need to conduct a public hearing, after which we'll need to discuss this matter and formulate a recommendation to the City Council. Thank you.
Any questions? Okay, if not, I'll open the public hearing. Ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak. Not everybody at once, please. Nobody? Seeing nobody come forward, I'll close the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to comment. The question was raised earlier about whether this ordinance should include some, I guess, technical requirements with respect to emissions and that kind of thing. The distillery process is heavily regulated by both the state and the federal governments. I don't believe the city has really any authority to get into that kind of regulation. I believe it would be inappropriate for us to try to make those kinds of regulations in our zoning ordinance. That is a matter for the state and federal authorities to handle, and I feel confident they will do so.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
I just glancing at this, I have one. So it's number 8. It says talks about parking requirements, but it doesn't. I guess somewhere else it's specifying the number of spaces that has to be available.
That would
everywhere else we have set number of spaces.
If they were going to use it as a assembly type use, the zoning ordinance is specific on that already. So when the site plan came in, we already have regulations dealing with the parking requirements.
Okay.
So
having nothing to do with it being a distillery.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, if the distillery decided to have an event arena or event area, then we would look at that when the site plan came through, and then we have parking standards for that already.
All right.
Okay. Thank you, Ken. Any other questions? Now we're ready for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make the motion to approve.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. Staff reports, other business. Mr. Whitaker.
Chairman, the only thing I have in addition is we have sent out the third mailing for our census. I am in front of the camera, and I am going to plug our census. We have about 61,000 counted right now. We do need people to fill out those. I was hoping while they're home on the snow days they could fill out those cards and please send them back in. We will start the door-to-door campaign probably next week with the fire department. There'll be more on that, but fill out those cards and send them in, please. That's all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Ives?
Nothing further.
Okay. There's no further business. We stand adjourned.